Alright, so, tonight, as I'm sure many of you have been made aware, the grand jury overseeing the case of the Ferguson events of Darrell Wilson shooting of Michael Brown has come out and declared their decision not to indict Wilson. Now, I suppose I should note for the occasional individual who may not be aware, some time ago, the 18-year-old African-American individual, Michael Brown, was allegedly unarmed, allegedly fleeing from a police officer. I suppose I shouldn't make any commentary that I cannot support with fact, but he was an 18-year-old African-American teenager, and under some circumstance that I will not attempt to elaborate on for lack of information on the topic, was shot 6 times by police officer Darrell Wilson. Since then, riots have erupted in Ferguson, Missouri, and have been ongoing for an extended period of time, and of course, today was the day that the decision of the grand jury came out, and again, the decision was not to indict Officer Wilson, which essentially means that he will not be standing trial for the death of Michael Brown. And when I first heard this news, I suppose dumbfounded would be the word for it. And I had to pause for a second. I had to kind of collect my thoughts and kind of analyze it and think, what exactly does this mean? And of course, I heard other people talking about it, other people discussing it, and I saw it all over the news, and it just kind of boiled up in me a bit. For the unaware, I am very much a political radical, though I attempt to be very considerate about my approach to those politics. So this, all being surrounded by all this news and hearing everything I have and learning what I've had by my admittedly limited research, but what I have learned nonetheless from somewhat reputable sources, has kind of inflamed me, and so I've decided that I want to dedicate tonight's vlog to the discussion of this decision. And as I mentioned, I am miffed about it. I am quite distraught. I am angered, and I am upset by it. And the reason behind that is severalfold. There are a couple of reasons different behind it. First and foremost, it shows that the grand jury, with a degree of wisdom, is disregarding the actions of the citizens of Ferguson, which, as I mentioned, has been rioting for the past while. And there is wisdom in that, and so I'm not especially angered by that. But it's a bit frustrating to me to see the people, which the United States ostensibly represents. I will not go into my own politics. It's too radical to discuss very openly. But to go along with the mainstream political thought, the United States ostensibly represents the people and is supposed to represent the will of the people. The people have made their will known, and understandably, not every act of the people, not every will of the people is to be enacted. But at the same time, the people have made their will quite well known, and it is being disregarded. And again, there's nothing inherently wrong about that. But for one of the rare times in history, and I shouldn't say in history, but in recent United States history, when the people have made the will inexorably known, it has been ignored. Not necessarily ignored, but it was not made law. And again, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I just think it's a little frustrating that the circumstances lent to this almost miraculous event of people joining together to make their will known. I am distraught by the fact that circumstances have led to that, ultimately meaning nothing. Not nothing per se, but a second reason as to why I'm kind of miffed over it is because the jury, as I have come to understand it, was comprised of 6 white men, 3 white women, 2 black women, and 1 black male. And as my significant other pointed out, race shouldn't matter. And the response that I made to that was, Well, normally it shouldn't, but the problem here is that this is a racially charged case. This is a case which is centered around racial tensions and racial relations, and as such, race does matter. Because the charges trying to be brought against Officer Wilson were that his homicide of Michael Brown was racially enacted. Like, he acted in racism, whether it was explicit or implicit racism, whether he was actively attempting to harm him for his race, or because his subconscious mind his inner thinking merely made it logical to him to think that this individual of African descent was a threat, or whatever it was. And so race does come to matter, and so it does become important that both sides are represented equally. And of course, the conclusion that my significant other drew from my stayings was that, well, 9 votes are needed for an indictment. Of the grand jury, 9 people have to say that the man should be indicted in order for him to be indicted. And of course, there are 9 white people, and I remarked on that. And he then said, well, he doubts that all 9 white people were biased against blacks. And I remarked, well, I'm not even concerned about the concept of bias. I'm not concerned about that. I have no reason to believe anyone was biased. I don't know who was on the jury personally, so I have no reason to think that they were biased. My concern, again, is the fact that we have 2 different racial cultures of black and white, and there are 2 different racial cultures. You cannot deny that simple fact. And we have these 2 different cultures, and one of them is not equally represented. And that's a problem. Because statistically speaking, Ferguson County is 2/3 African in descent. So you have 2/3, a majority of this area is a member of the ethnico-cultural group that is represented in minority by the grand jury. That's a concern to me, because you now have the side, quote unquote, which is the demographic majority, which is the political minority. That is essentially a case of apartheid. That is essentially a case of the majority is represented by a minority. I don't even have anything more to say. I don't think there is anything more to say on that. If that doesn't register as a problem to you, then I don't think that anything more I can say will convince you. The third reason as to why the Ferguson decision is a concern to me: if we are to completely disregard the concept of race, if we did not even register the fact that this was a white man who killed a black man, this is still a man killing a man. This is an individual in authority, a police officer, an individual who ostensibly is trusted to keep the law and protect and serve the citizenry of the United States, harming and killing a member of that citizenry. That is another concern. First and foremost, that is just part 1 of this reason. This is sub-reason 1. So we have a man sworn to protect and serve, and he's harming. And that happens all over the United States. The stories about police abuses are off the chart, but I won't even try to touch on the rest of those. My concern is, again, focused right here in the Ferguson case. Officer Wilson killed Michael Brown. Flat out. Whether it was a crime or not, whether Wilson was justified in the killing or not, he killed him. Shot 6 bullets into him from the front, as I understand it. I could be wrong, but I know that it was 6 bullets. And he's not answering for that. That is my concern. In the United States, the idea is that when you are put on criminal trial, you are innocent. You are presumed to be innocent until you are proven to be guilty. My significant other brought up the fact that, well, if a grand jury doesn't have enough evidence to indict him, then they're probably not going to find enough evidence to convict him. And my response to that was, the purpose of an indictment is not to determine whether there's enough evidence. It's to determine whether there is evidence to suggest that this man may be guilty of a crime. From there, he is to be indicted and charged with the crime, and then placed on trial, presumed to be innocent. The assumption is that he did not commit a crime. And the goal of the opposing party is to prove that he did. And until that point happens, until a court of law determines that he is guilty, he's innocent. The assumption is that he has not committed a crime. An indictment is not saying that he committed a crime. It is saying that there is reason to analyze the case, that there is reason enough to consider the possibility that he committed a crime. I would say that the stories behind the killing, whether they were reliable or not, are enough to analyze this case, to consider the possibility that this officer committed a crime. It would then be up to a court of law in a trial by law to determine whether or not there is sufficient evidence to convict him of homicide and any other charges that could be brought along with it. So to not even indict this officer is to say that, well, we understand that he killed a man, but that's all right. We're not gonna question it. And that is a terrible perversion of the very concept of legality. I mean, again, I won't go into my own politics, but again, with following along mainstream political thought, the concept of legality, of constitutionalism, is that everyone is equally accountable. Whether you are a beggar on the streets or the President of the United States, you are equally accountable under the law. If the President steals from me, if the President walks up to me with a gun, puts it up to my head and says, "Give me your wallet," he is still committing armed robbery. It doesn't matter he's President of the United States. It doesn't matter that Officer Wilson is an officer of the law. All that matters is the fact that he killed a man. And what matters to me is the fact that he is not answering for it. He is not going before a jury of his peers and a judge of the law to answer for his actions. He's not getting a trial. In essence, Michael Brown is not getting a trial. In essence, Michael Brown is not being allowed. The spirit of Michael Brown, whatever you believe, the concept of Michael Brown, what Michael Brown represents in the public conscious, is not getting a chance to bring this man to court for his murder. I know it's kind of extravagant to make that Brown came back as a ghost and was not allowed to sue this man for his murder, or even if he somehow came back from the dead in a kind of Lazarus situation, and he was pronounced no longer legally dead, but you could still argue that the Officer Wilson committed homicide. That would be like saying Michael Brown cannot bring him to court. Or even if he did not die, that would be like saying he could not bring this officer to court for attempted homicide. Are you starting? I hope you're starting to see my concern here. I hope you're starting to see why I'm so distraught over this. And again, I register the fact that Officer Wilson may not have committed a crime at all. I completely register the fact that he may in fact be completely innocent, that Michael Brown is in fact the villain here. That perhaps Michael Brown was in fact a threat to Officer Wilson, and Officer Wilson responded as anyone would in a life or death situation, and he terminated the threat. But again, the fact that he is not even answering for this death, the fact that he's not even having to go before others and explain why this happened in an official court of law, that is an absolute violation of everything this country claims to stand for. And it just makes people like me, it just gives people like me a lot of ammo to use against it. Because the next time people say that law rules in this country is ruled by law and by constitution, I can just point out, well, if I become a police officer, I can kill a man. I don't have to answer for it. You would. That is the problem. And I'm not advocating for blind riding. I'm not advocating for ignorant outrage. I advocate fully for people to go out and get the facts, to conduct research and get the facts, learn what they feel are the important factors about this case, and then bring them up to light with others. And make it, if you feel distraught over this as well, and you feel like this case has to be looked over again, make it known. Make it known to others. Make sure that other people are aware of what's happening. Make sure other people are aware of what you have learned through your research. Enlighten them. And if you are of the crowd that thinks that this is completely blown out of proportion, that everyone should stop worrying about it, or if you think that nothing's going to do anything, well, if you think that nothing will change things, then I kind of really question the way you approach life. I would severely recommend that you look up some of my random quotes of wisdom, particularly one entitled "One Man." That's basically all I have to say to you and your party is contained within that video. I'll even link to it in the description. And if you think that this is completely blown out of proportion, then I have to question what you consider to be the appropriate proportion for it to be. Because again, as I see things, this is a violation and a perversion of what this nation is apparently supposed to stand for. I think that's a pretty big proportion. It is an ideological insult. But I believe I've said everything that I have to say on the matter. I've gotten it all out of my system, and if you like the way I approach it or anything, if you enjoy, give it a thumbs up. If you check out my other videos, find that you like what I do in general, feel free to subscribe, do as you please. I hope you enjoyed, whether you agree with my stance or not. I hope that I've at least done something for you. I hope I've enlightened you to some new information that has caused you to kind of get the gears turning a bit more, or that at least I have given you a new perspective on the topic. All that being said, I hope you got something out of it. Link to my Twitter and my Tumblr in the description. Feel free to check those out if you like. And I hope you have a good one.